Sending your girl off to college? She's Birdie gets it. You've packed the sheets, the caddy, the mini fridge, but the one thing you can't stop thinking about is her safety when you're not there. That's why She's Birdie made the College Safety Bundle. 3 tools that cover almost every scenario campus throws at her. Birdie 3.0 is her everyday keychain alarm. One pull activates a 130 decibel siren, as loud as a jet engine. Birdie Disc is a safety light and alarm that clips on hands-free for visibility for late-night walks or early morning runs. And Birdie Box is her portable door alarm for the dorm door. It mounts in 30 seconds and sounds the instant that door opens. She's Birdie is the safety brand trusted by over 4 million women worldwide. Get the College Safety Bundle by She's Birdie and save big when you bundle. Visit shesbirdie.com. That's SHESBIRDIE.com.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age, with a special emphasis on their lives behind the scenes. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Welcome to the conclusion of Sir Laurence Olivier's story. If you haven't listened to part 1, please go back and do so and come right on back. In part 1, we left off in 1940 and the beginning of the marriage of Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh. The great lovers were finally united in marriage, but there was also a war in full effect. During World War II, there was an increasing pressure for Laurence Olivier to return to England and enlist in the British Army, and he did so by learning to fly and joining the British Fleet Air Arm. I read that only men under 21 were wanted at this time, unless they could fly. So he learned how to fly so he could serve his beloved country. While he served, Vivien Leigh traveled to entertain the troops. After a trip to North Africa, she became sick with a persistent cough and was diagnosed with tuberculosis. It killed Larry to not be able to be with her during her hospitalization and recovery. Vivien Leigh had, by this time, also been showing signs of mental illness, and it was during the period she was separated from Larry that her symptoms seemed to be the most challenging. She had severe mood swings and would often fall into hysteria-type episodes. The tipping point was in 1945 while filming Caesar and Cleopatra. She tripped while on set and had a bad fall. Vivien was pregnant, which had the couple feeling elated. They were so excited. The fall resulted in her losing the baby. Vivien was devastated with this loss and fell into a deep depression for quite some time afterwards. And the traumatic incident was the fuel to the fire for her fragile mental health. It was at this point where she really began exhibiting alarming symptoms, high manias that she would not remember at all once out of them, and the lowest of low depression periods. She is now believed to have had severe bipolar disorder, but there was no such diagnosis at that time. Unfortunately, mental illness was not treated very respectfully, and she was not able to get the help and support she needed so badly. But she did have her Larry by her side. I want to read an excerpt from Jesse Lasky Jr.'s book, Love Scene. Although I don't completely agree with the entire message, I do think it encapsulates Vivien Leigh's state of health during the late 1940s. Quote, Vivien Leigh's miscarriages, manic depression, and bouts of tuberculosis have always been thought of as separate illnesses, but they form a pattern of physical neglect. She mistook drive for energy, energy for strength, And certainly she gave the impression that however physically fragile she might be, her spirit was invincible. End quote. Vivien Leigh was a strong woman, and her mental and physical health struggles were constantly challenging that strength. After the war and serving his country for over 3 years, Laurence Olivier returned to his beloved British stage after several years away from it. He helped restore and revive the war-damaged historic Old Vic Theatre in London, and Laurence Olivier Productions was born. The disappointment that came with Romeo and Juliet in the U.S. was a distant memory. He was back where he belonged, and he was a greater star than ever. Laurence Olivier and his wife, Vivien Leigh, appeared together for the first time on the English stage in 1949 with the production of School for Scandal. They had poured their hearts and souls into Romeo and Juliet together in New York in 1940 to disastrous results. But on their home turf in London, they were celebrated. On opening night in London in January of 1949, they took 6 curtain calls. The couple got into a bit of hot water over back taxes, so with the help of their accountant, they found a loophole by having their company, Laurence Olivier Productions, pay for as much of their personal luxuries as possible. They paid themselves a small salary and had all of their lifestyle wants paid for by company funds, because the company would only be taxed on its profits. So, Laurence Olivier Productions began paying for Vivien's manicures, hair, and massages, most of her clothing, their vacation home, groceries, travel, vehicles, restaurant bills, wines, and champagnes. None of that was paid from their personal salaries. To get an idea of what kind of lifestyle the Oliviers were living, in one 3-month period, the following liquor charges were charged to the company: 42 bottles of champagne, 60 bottles of wine, and 21 bottles of various liquors. All top quality, of course. In 3 months. That's a lot of booze. Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh made a home for themselves in the historic Notley Abbey in 1944, a place that brought them a lot of peace and happiness. Vivien was actually adamantly against the idea of purchasing the historic abbey, but once she visualized what she could do to revitalize its interior, she warmed up to the idea. She had always had an impeccable eye for design. Within months, she was absolutely in love with their new home. Larry planted hundreds of trees on the grounds: oak trees, willow trees, apple trees, lime trees. Anything he could acquire that would flourish in the climate, he would plant. They kept dairy cows and raised bees. The cows were named after Vivien's characters: Cleopatra, Titania, and Ophelia, but no Scarlet. Once they had the abbey inhabitable, Vivien was never content with the interior design and was redecorating on a consistent basis. She loved to be surrounded by fine paintings and beautiful flowers inside their home. She loved flowers. And they entertained. They really entertained. Vivien loved to entertain. They entertained so often that Olivier had 1,000 copies of a map to Notley printed to share with guests. The dining room at the Abbey seated 12, and there were 5 comfortable guest rooms for weekend guests. As an avid reader and having a keen attention to detail, Vivien made sure each bedside table of the Abbey's guest rooms held a book that fit each individual guest's interests. Vivien planned the 4-course dinners and wine pairings personally, and she expected their guests to dress for dinner each night, which would begin in the library for drinks and end with games like charades or canasta. They welcomed guests like Noel Coward, David Niven, Danny Kaye, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and George Cukor. Larry wasn't as keen on the weekends-long events at Notley Abbey, but he knew planning for them filled Vivien with so much joy. And when Vivien was joyous, his heart was happy. When Vivien was well, she was a radiant and energetic hostess. But her periods of illness, both from the tuberculosis and mental illness, were becoming more frequent. To make matters worse for the couple, Larry began experiencing his own emotional difficulties. He started having a horrifying recurring dream. The details varied, but he was always falling uncontrollably in them. Sometimes it was a plane crash, sometimes a fall on stage. Laurence Olivier was a workaholic, and he was clearly overworking himself. He was balancing supporting Vivien's mental and physical health struggles, their never-ending social commitments, and an overflowing professional plate. And his mind was giving him the not-so-subtle hints that it was time to slow down. And then, Larry's nightmare came true. On a flight home to England from New York, luckily before getting over the ocean, the airplane carrying Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh, amongst other passengers, had an engine catch fire, and the plane was forced into an emergency landing from 15,000 feet. It was a terrifying experience, and luckily, everyone aboard survived. And then, in the summer of 1949, Vivien dropped a bombshell on Larry. I'll let him tell you what happened in his own words. Quote, "It came like a bolt from the blue, like a drop of water. I almost thought my ears had deceived me. I don't love you anymore." I must have looked as stricken as I felt, for she went on. "There's no one else or anything like that. I mean, I still love you, but in a different way. Sort of, well, like a brother." She actually used those words. "I felt as if I had been told that I had been condemned to death." End quote. Larry couldn't believe it. They had once had such an intense, uncontrollable love. They would have sacrificed everything just to be together. And now she told him she felt nothing for him anymore. The fire and electricity was gone for her. That wasn't the end of their story, though. A story like theirs never really has an end as long as they are both living and breathing. But their story as a partnership hadn't reached the end of the road yet. Larry couldn't leave her. Her words hurt him deeply, but he didn't want to leave her. To the outside world, he buried his hurt inside and acted as though all was beautiful and happy. One factor that swayed his actions after this moment in their relationship was how he was perceived to the public, how they were perceived. 2 years prior, on July 8, 1947, he had received the great honor of being knighted by King George VI. He and Vivien Leigh were the first couple of the stage. They were theater royalty. People looked up to them as a couple. He didn't want to let his public down, and he didn't want to let Vivien down. He knew better than anyone of the struggle she faced with her mental health. Her own demons would be put to the ultimate test that same year, in 1949, when she agreed to play Blanche Dubois on the stage in a production of the Tennessee Williams play, A Streetcar Named Desire, directed by her husband, Laurence Olivier. After 326 performances of Streetcar for the couple, with Vivien as the intensely complex and troubled character of Blanche Dubois, Warner Brothers in Hollywood wanted to bring the story to life on the silver screen, and they wanted Vivien Leigh to bring her Blanche there for it. At the same time, William Wyler asked Laurence Olivier if he would be interested in a film for Paramount, the character of Hurstwood in Carrie, opposite Jennifer Jones. To put the intermingling and revolving romances of show business in a kind of mental tongue twister, Jesse Lasky Jr. laid it out for us in his book. Quote, Olivier would be sharing close-ups with the newest wife of the man whose ex-wife had produced Olivier's current wife's current play. End quote. This refers to Gone with the Wind producer David O. Selznick, who at the time was married to Olivier's Carrie co-star Jennifer Jones, but previously married to theatrical Streetcar producer Irene Selznick, who was heading Vivien's current production. And to add a little more Hollywood spice to that, Irene Selznick was the daughter of MGM head Louis B. Mayer. That really has nothing to do with the life of Laurence Olivier, but I found it entertaining. So anyways, back to Hollywood the Oliviers went, after a decade away. Larry for Carrie and Vivien for A Streetcar Named Desire. Vivien left a bit earlier than Larry, and letters she wrote to him from her travels reveal the complex dynamic of their relationship and evidence of the ups and downs of her emotional self. From the woman who had recently told her husband she didn't love him anymore, that she cared for him more like a brother, she wrote this, quote, "Oh, sweet, sweet Baba, if we were together, this would seem quite exciting, but then that applies to everything in life. In bed, the berths are so very wide, and it's just sheer waste you're not here beside me. I kiss you and miss you and love you so deeply and eternally. My love, my life, my friend. Sweet, sweet Larry." End quote. Maybe it's true that distance makes the heart grow fonder. Or maybe they just really did have a complex and complicated bond. Intensely passionate at times and intensely difficult at others. Most likely, the real driving force behind the relationship was Vivien's mental illness, which was becoming increasingly more severe. Was their love deep enough to stand the test of time? Vivien Leigh, of course, loved Laurence Olivier. She loved him more than anything else in the whole world, more than her own child. But when she fell into increasingly severe manic episodes, she often said extremely hurtful things and acted in extremely hurtful ways. She drank excessively while in mania states, and she had affairs. And when she came out of those terrifying episodes, she never remembered a single moment of them. She left them horrified at her own behaviors, spending much of her time writing letters of apologies to those she had disrespected. But it was her husband, Laurence Olivier, who became the target of most of the bad. Vivien, over the years, grew to understand the warning signs that a manic episode may be brewing in her mind. She could then retreat from the public and cancel social engagements. But Larry, he was there for it all. And he did what he could to support her through it. But it absolutely took a mental and emotional toll on him. How could it not? He loved her so deeply, but he was confronted with so much emotional ugliness at the hands of her mental illness. It was difficult. Remember, it was the 1950s. Mental illness was treated so much differently. Those who struggled with mental illness were seen as crazy. Any kind of episode was categorized as a nervous breakdown. Treatments were often electric shock treatments or being locked up in a mental institution. Vivien was lucky to have Larry, but it was not easy for either of them. Through it all, they both threw themselves into their work on stage and on the silver screen. A bright ray of hope arrived in 1956. Vivien learned she was pregnant again. It had been 11 years since the fall on the set of Caesar and Cleopatra that resulted in the miscarriage of her first child with Laurence Olivier, and the couple was elated to have another chance and of having a tangible token of their long love, a child to love together. The couple publicly announced their news to the press on July 12, 1956. 2 days before Marilyn Monroe's arrival in London to film The Prince and the Showgirl opposite Olivier. The public went wild over the news of the pregnancy, and then wild over the arrival of Marilyn Monroe. While giving an interview to the Daily Mail about the pregnancy, Vivien was asked about Marilyn Monroe. She would not be one of the godparents, she remarked. Then the couple was asked if they might kiss for the camera. Larry declined. "We're too old for that," he said. "Not too old to make a baby, though, I guess." The Oliviers were very much front and center in the press, and the future was looking bright. The joy and anticipation of expecting a child was for the most part good for Vivien's mental health. She planned the nursery. It would be yellow and white. They discussed names. They hired a nanny. They envisioned their future as parents together. Vivien was 42 years old, and Larry was 49, and they had been a couple for 20 years by this time. They were already each the parents of a child, although not closely involved with them, and those children were already young adults. In fact, Larry's son Tarquin had learned about the pregnancy in the tabloids, just like the rest of the world. Larry and Vivien had been through it all together. They'd experienced great achievements together and supported each other through great setbacks and heartbreak. On August 13, 1956, another great heartbreak was added to their story together. Vivien lost the baby. In a sad twist of fate, Larry's brother and his young wife welcomed a baby girl that same day, 2 months early. The following spring, Larry and Vivien set off for a grand 5,000-mile European tour for their production of Titus Andronicus, traveling to each new location by train, so Vivien didn't have to fly. The tour began well, but was soon overshadowed by Vivien's mental illness. She became obsessive and unpredictable, leaving Larry often embarrassed as he picked up the pieces left behind. The couple took a much-needed rest after the tour, apart from one another. This was the beginning of the end of the great love story that was Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh. In the spring of 1958, Laurence Olivier revived his role in The Entertainer, which he'd starred in a couple of years prior, for an 8-week engagement at the Palace Theatre in London's West End. From there, the production was scheduled to move on to Broadway in New York. The original actress, Dorothy Tootin, who played Larry's daughter in the play, had to leave the production, so she was replaced by a 27-year-old actress named Joan Plowright. Dorothy leaving may have had something to do with the affair she was having with Laurence Olivier. Both Larry and Vivien were stepping away from their marriage to find connectedness with others. Vivien's mostly fueled by her mental illness, and Larry's as a coping mechanism and relief from it. Vivien's episodes were getting worse, and things had escalated to physical altercations on some occasions. After one such occurrence, Larry realized something terrifying. He recalled, quote, "I realized with horror that each of us was quite capable of murdering or causing death to the other." End quote. This reality occurred during Larry's affair with Dorothy Tootin. Soon after the incident, Vivien asked Dorothy to visit her. She did, reluctantly, and Vivien told her that she had to end her relationship with her husband, unless she wanted to be known as a murderess, because if she continued on with her husband, Vivien would kill herself. Soon after, Dorothy ended the affair. Enter Joan Plowright, Dorothy's friend and the actress who replaced her in The Entertainer, in the role of Laurence Olivier's daughter. There was a clear connection between the two, but Joan was also married and very cautious of the flirtation occurring. She didn't want to be the next co-star in a line of affairs. Eventually, though, she couldn't deny the attraction and connection. Rumors instantly began to circulate about a relationship between Olivier and the new woman who plays his daughter. And those rumors proved to be correct. By this time, Larry and Vivien were mostly separated, but would still put on a show in the public's eye when needed. Larry and Joan tried to part from one another until they were both divorced, but they found it impossible to do. Reading the letters between them, the fire was very reminiscent of the early days of his romance with Vivien. Larry finally asked Vivien for a divorce in a 23-page letter. He loved writing letters, and they were often very long. She threatened suicide, so he backed off. Then he tried again. On May 22, 1960, Laurence Olivier's 53rd birthday, Vivien Leigh issued a statement to the press. Quote, "Lady Olivier wishes to say that Sir Laurence has asked for a divorce in order to marry Miss Joan Plowright. She will naturally do whatever he wishes." End quote. Larry thought the timing of this announcement to the public was very intentional, his birthday. Joan Plowright, who had also been married to someone else, ended her marriage as well. And just like that, it was over. The great love, the love that was so severe they walked away from their lives and their children for it. It was over. They sold Notley Abbey, and they closed the cover of the long book of Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh. Vivien summed up their 25-year union to a friend. Quote, "We were beautiful, we were ambitious, we lived for each other. It was a selfish seizure, and it has turned to dust." End quote. We're going to take a quick break here, and then the rest of our story.
Is your vehicle safe? Millions of cars have open recalls, including dangerous Takata airbags. Don't take the risk. Visit nhtsa.gov/recalls to check your license plate number or VIN. Repairs are easy and always free. Safe cars save lives.
Welcome back. Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh were officially divorced on December 2nd, 1960. And on March 17th, 1961, 54-year-old Laurence Olivier married 31-year-old Joan Plowright. When the older woman who acted as city clerk at the Norwalk, Connecticut City Hall asked for their information for their marriage license, she said, "Name? Laurence Olivier. Profession? Actor. Are you? How very nice." She had no idea who he was. The judge who married them didn't recognize him either. They got married, returned to New York, each performed in their respective Broadway shows, and then could finally celebrate their marriage with a wedding reception. Richard Burton organized their wedding reception, and Lauren Bacall provided their 3-tiered wedding cake. Within a month, Joan was pregnant. Richard Olivier was born on December 3rd, 1961. 13 months later, Larry and Joan welcomed their second child, daughter Tamsin, born on January 10th, 1963. Joan had a miscarriage the following year, and on July 27th, 1966, their third child together was born, Julie Kate Olivier. All three of them eventually made lives for themselves in the performing arts. During the early days of their marriage, Laurence Olivier also became the first director of the Royal National Theatre. His life was full of vibrancy and excitement. It was like a whole new beginning for him after at least a decade of unhappiness and turmoil. All of that vibrancy and excitement he felt also came with exhaustion. He had a lot on his plate. All of this plus still performing. At one time, he was performing in one play, rehearsing for another, and planning a third, all at the same time, and running the Royal National Theatre. He was regularly working 15-hour days or more. His role at the National was itself more than a full-time job, while trying to juggle a family life with small children at home. When, in January of 1964, he crashed. His body told him it was just too much. He was bedridden for 10 days, and when he thought he finally felt well enough to go outside for a jog, his legs gave out as his body told him it wasn't quite ready to jump back into life. He needed to slow down. This was his first big wake-up call. Did he slow down? No, not really. But he had been warned nonetheless. It could be argued that Laurence Olivier did quite the opposite of slowing down. He actually added to his life by starting an affair with a co-star, actress Sarah Miles. She was only 18 years old. The initial affair lasted for about 2 years on and off, and it appears Joan did know about it. In May of 1967, just after he turned 60 years old, Laurence Olivier was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He ignored the pain and put off seeing a doctor for a long while. He was too busy to confront the fact that he may be sick. But it finally came to the point where he couldn't ignore it any longer. He started radiation treatment, and about a month into that, he developed pneumonia. He was really sick. He was so sick from the pneumonia that Joan did not think he was going to survive it. He was hospitalized for a bit for his treatment and recovery. As he lay in the hospital, he received a call from Vivien's partner, the man she had begun seeing soon after their divorce, Jack Merivale. Jack had returned home to find Vivien on the floor. She was dead. Larry jumped up and discharged himself from the hospital and rushed right over to Vivien's home. He spent time with her before the caretakers took her away. Olivia later wrote, quote, "Alone with the one with whom I had shared a life that resembled nothing so much as an express lift skying you upwards and throwing you downwards in an insanely nonstop fashion. I stood and prayed for forgiveness for all the evils that had sprung up between us." End quote. The great love of his life was gone. Vivien Leigh was only 53 years old. Laurence Olivier jumped right back into his rigorous working schedule after his prostate cancer diagnosis and treatment, the pneumonia that almost killed him, and the death of Vivien Leigh. The treatment had worked to clear the cancer, but he was rushed in for an emergency appendectomy shortly after Vivien's death. And that was followed by gout, which he then suffered from for many years. Still, nothing could stop this man from his constant work of running the National Theatre, acting as the lead in production after production, and directing production after production. Joan was still acting as well, sometimes alongside her husband and sometimes not. I think it's safe to say that Laurence Olivier was a workaholic, and he loved his craft. The theater is what kept his blood flowing. It was his true reason for living. He loved his wife and children. He loved all his wives. But his true undying love was for the stage. The only thing that could stop him from his work in the theater was his own personal health, forcing him to stop. During the summer of 1974, Olivier began writing in his diary about unusual pains he was experiencing. Frozen shoulder, he first wrote. Then, aching arms and thighs and sore fingernails. Then, face blown up. He finally saw a doctor and was diagnosed with a rare disease called dermatopoliomyositis. And then he was told he would be hospitalized for 6 to 9 months. The disease worsened quickly. Soon he had a difficult time swallowing and had to be fed through a stomach tube. His doctors told Joan and Tarquin that he was dying, that he would likely die within 6 weeks. But he didn't die, and his condition didn't deteriorate any further. Instead, he slowly became stronger. Laurence Olivier was too tough and determined to let a little thing like dermatopoliomyositis take him down. Instead of planning a funeral, Joan was eventually able to bring her husband home. She did gently bring up the subject to him about writing his memoirs, an idea Larry had been toying around with for years, but never found the time for it. He was way too busy. This was yet another wake-up call for him that his time on Earth was limited, no matter how larger than life he seemed. Joan brought up the idea when he was still in the hospital, and from there, he began to write. His sister Sybil would come visit to help him in writing the story of their childhoods. It wasn't always easy. He was still very ill and being fed through a feeding tube as he began writing his story. There were good days and there were very bad days, and his medication sometimes sent him into states of hysteria and paranoia. But for the most part, his mind was well and his mental energy was great. His physical body just had a lot to recover from. This latest brush with death had turned out to be the greatest blessing in disguise. It was his final hint from his mind and body that he had to slow down. Because if he didn't, the next hint may be the last one. This is finally what it took for him to realize that he was overworking himself, almost to death. He needed that break away from the theater to show him just how much it was controlling his life. By his own choice, yes, but he realized it was becoming too overwhelming as he progressed in age. Because of this wake-up call, he had finally given himself the time to reflect on his life and write down his story. To reconnect with the people who meant the most in his life and making sure that he got his story right. His sister, his first wife Jill, friends and former co-stars and colleagues. And because he was given this gift and accepted this gift, we know his story too. Another gift given to Laurence Olivier was his next professional project, something to look forward to as he continued to heal in the hospital, something new. His brother-in-law, Joan's brother David Plowright, was the program controller for Granada Television. And seeing how discouraged his brother-in-law was at times during his long recovery process in the hospital, he floated an idea past him. Laurence Olivier Presents, a series of modern plays that would air on television. He could choose the plays, introduce them, maybe even direct one or two if he was well enough. Well, Laurence Olivier, not surprising as a classical Shakespearean stage actor, was not a huge fan of television. But then, once he was able to ponder the idea for a bit, it grew on him. And before long, he was very excited about this project. And it was at that point, according to Joan, that his health really began to take a turn for the better. Suddenly back in charge, she said. He just needed a project like that he could feel control over. He was still very weak after he was finally released from the hospital at the end of January 1975, after months of recovery and treatment. And he had casts or bandages on his fingers and constant sores on his fingertips for quite a while after, years actually. It sounds like his fingertips never quite recovered and he lived with a lot of pain in them. His stamina was poor. He had lost a lot of muscle mass and almost had to learn how to walk again. But if we know anything about Laurence Olivier, it's that he is tough and determined. His wicked determination would get him through this. He was excited to get back to work. Plus, he kind of had to work. Although being Laurence Olivier and having the career and accomplishments he did, he wasn't really swimming in money. He'd always lived the high life, and his children with Joan Plowright all had expensive school tuitions. So he had Laurence Olivier Presents on television. That alone was about a full-time job. He acted in a couple, but did mostly directing and presenting. One play for Laurence Olivier Presents that he appeared in was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, with Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, and Maureen Stapleton. And then, just a few months after being released from the hospital, he was offered a movie in Hollywood, Marathon Man. Then a couple more films. He was suddenly very busy again for a man who almost just died. But one thing he didn't think he could handle very much anymore was the demands of acting in the theater. Although he had made a miraculous recovery, he wasn't able to recoup back to his prior health and stamina, not even close. But all things considered, he was living a very active professional life. And he wasn't ready to hang up his hat on his romantic life either. He was married to Joan, but he still spent time with his special lady friends. While in Hollywood filming The Betsy with Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones in 1977, 70-year-old Laurence Olivier reconnected with his on-again, off-again fling, Sarah Miles. He first spent time with his son Tarquin, who flew to California from the Far East to stay with his dad for a week. And during that time, they had a lot of great father-son bonding, including Laurence Olivier complaining bitterly to his son about his impotence. A great problem for a man like him who had always held intimacy and romance at high importance in his life. So his time spent staying with Sarah was very romantic from what it sounds like, but not as romantic as he would have liked. She did what she could to make him happy. I solaced him, she said. That's what you do as a mistress. Sarah Miles actually had to fly to London to appear in a film before Larry was able to return there. But when he was finally able to return home, he did not go directly home to his wife and children. He went to see Sarah. And while he was with her there, Sarah recalled watching him deteriorate by the day. But still, he kept working. He used all the power and strength he had to keep making movies. In 1979, Laurence Olivier was presented with yet another great honor. At that year's Academy Awards ceremony in LA, he was presented with an honorary Academy Award celebrating his decades of incredible work in films, his third Oscar. and it was presented to him by Mr. Cary Grant. And Laurence Olivier was also nominated for a Best Actor Academy Award at that same ceremony for his film, The Boys from Brazil. In October of 1979, 77-year-old Laurence Olivier gave an interview to Rex Reed of the New York Daily News, hands protected by gloves as his fingers had never healed and were nearly constantly raw and bleeding. Here is what he said in that interview. Quote, "I must look forward to the future. I can no longer bear the sight of myself as a young man. In Korea, they showed Wuthering Heights one night on TV in the middle of a dinner party, and I wouldn't even get up to walk into the other room to see myself as Heathcliff. I have very little adrenaline left, and I'm fading fast. I am almost used up now, and I can feel the end coming. My children are 12 and 17, and I've got nothing to leave them but the money which I make from films. Nothing is beneath me if it pays well. I've earned the right to damn well grab whatever I can in the time I've got left." End quote. I do need to say that he had 3 children with Joan Plowright, so either he didn't mention them all or it was lost during translation with the interviewer. But what this interview tells us is that he felt the effects of time on his body. He felt the effects of those serious illnesses, his loss of strength and stamina, and his loss of youthfulness. Even Laurence Olivier is yet a mere mortal. But he had clearly never lost his intense determination and his love for his art, because he was going to keep going as long as his body and mind would allow. So he did. In 1980, he was back in Hollywood making a remake of The Jazz Singer, which, of course, was the first feature-length talking motion picture ever made. This version was a modernized pop version of the story and starred Neil Diamond in the Al Jolson part in his film debut, which I think maybe started and ended with this movie, aside from a few cameos in other films. I haven't seen it, but it had a wide range of mixed reviews on IMDB. Laurence Olivier did not like the film. He didn't like the updated storyline, and he thought the entire production was weak. He said, quote, "The script has been entirely rehashed, scene by scene by scene by scene. I think I will be going a bit far in a commercial, rather cheap commercial sense. I took it on, and I wish to God I hadn't. I am regretting it very bitterly now, but it is so awful, it makes me feel sick. Never felt like that about my work as long as I can remember. I think it'll make anyone with any artistic pretensions feel physically ill. It has been a pretty horrific job." End quote. But it gave him a hefty paycheck, $1 million, which would be $4 million today, minus hefty fees to his agent, taxes, and other services. But still not bad. And that big paycheck was more his mission in these later years than doing work that fed his soul, which he clearly displayed in his words here. 20 years prior, he never would have even considered taking on a role he felt that way about. But he also realized that he kind of had to take the roles that he could as a man in his 70s. The versatility just didn't exist like when he was in his 30s, 40s, and 50s. The money was important now. He wanted to leave behind as much as he could for his children. In February of 1982, 74-year-old Laurence Olivier received a great honor when he was made a member of the Order of Merit, something only 24 individuals could hold at any given time, and something that no other actor had ever been honored with. He was now in the same realm as Winston Churchill and Florence Nightingale. He was then a Knight Bachelor, a Baron, and held the esteemed honor of the Order of Merit. 3 honors from his country that showcased just how important his work and legacy were. He had lived such an accomplished life professionally, and his personal life had been quite a roller coaster at times. It was time to put his focus on his memoirs, the story of his life that he had begun 6 years earlier. He secured a publisher, and that meant he had deadlines to meet, so his autobiography became his primary focus. He had decided on its title right from the start when his sister had wrote his words for him from his hospital bed. Confessions of an Actor. And he was ready to tell all. In fact, he told too much. Laurence Olivier was a writer, a talker. Remember that 32-page long letter he'd written to Vivien Leigh during his ship crossing to do Wuthering Heights? Well, he was quite known to write very lengthy letters to his friends and family. Boy was a talker, and his words were filled with drama and romance, very poetic. I read many excerpts from his letters during my research, and to say his messages were colorful would be putting it very lightly. So when he wrote his life story, it was long. He had a ghostwriter there to tidy things up a bit, and after receiving Olivier's first draft, he did some minor grammatical and punctuation corrections and slimmed down some of the stories, eliminating 50,000 words. Laurence Olivier was not happy about this and threatened to drop the project altogether. They compromised, and the book was finally published in 1982. Although I didn't read it, there were many parts of it included in the biographies I did use in my research. I tread very carefully with autobiographies because oftentimes they are more of a diary of thoughts and memories, and sometimes those memories are proven to be inaccurate or embellished. That's what Laurence Olivier biographers believe about this memoir. Biographer Terry Coleman said the book mirrors his mind perfectly. He confesses some very, very intimate details about his life in it. But remember what I said at the very start of our journey through his life. He is a great storyteller. I think all of his stories are indeed based on fact, but he was known to embellish facts to make for a more poetic story. At the very least, I would like to read it one day purely for the entertainment value, and to experience that feeling of being in his mind a little bit more. But for what we are here for today, I am so grateful for the biographers I used, especially Terry Coleman, for their hard work of piecing it all together. Vivien Leigh had undoubtedly been the great love of Laurence Olivier's life. Their connection was filled with extreme passion and extreme turmoil. I can't help but wonder what could have been of their relationship if Vivien Leigh had had access to the resources available today for mental illness. That was really the root of the difficulties they faced as a couple. Laurence Olivier remained married to his third wife, Joan Plowright, but their marriage was never on the same level as his connection with Vivien. They drifted apart through the years, and as he got older and was less able to work, or unable to play the roles he once had, a deep resentment simmered up in their marriage, which slowly came to a boil. Joan had never stopped acting. She was a very accomplished stage actress and was continually working throughout their marriage. Joan was 22 years younger than Larry, so she was still in her prime. She still had that energy and stamina and physical health that he fought so hard to hold on to, but eventually slipped out of his hands. He was proud of his wife's theatrical accomplishments, but he was resentful of them too. He was jealous that she was still able to do the things that he wanted to do so badly. But they stuck together, and she was a very supportive partner for him as his health declined. Laurence Olivier was hit with a couple more health setbacks after the publication of his autobiography. He developed pleurisy in the summer of 1983 and underwent surgery later that same year to remove one of his kidneys. And his memory was deteriorating at an alarming rate. But still, this guy was tough. He went to work and filmed what would be his final movie, Wild Geese 2, in Berlin. His last play had been a decade earlier in 1973. It was time to close the book on his long, long career as an actor. His story was told, and he had shared his most intimate thoughts and experiences with the world. He was ready to proceed into the sunset of his life. Laurence Olivier turned 80 years old in May of 1987, and his once-beloved National Theatre hosted a grand celebration to honor the occasion and the man who had given so much to not only the National Theatre, but the world stage. There were skits, live music, champagne, glitter, and my favorite, y'all know I love this, someone popping out of a giant cake. For this occasion, it was his daughter who popped out and yelled, "Happy birthday, Dad!" It was a marvelous night that Sir Laurence Olivier did not want to end. Joan had to nearly drag him out of there. He knew this was likely his last grand moment. By early summer 1989, Laurence Olivier's one remaining kidney was failing. His body was telling him it had worked as long and as hard as it could, but that it was time to retire. Within weeks, he was facing his final days on Earth. During his last hours, as he floated in and out of consciousness, he said to his son Richard, who was by his side, "I don't want this." Joan returned home a bit later. She was there when her husband used all his strength to raise his hand up a bit and mutter these words, "Dear God, get me out of this." Those were his last words. Shortly after this, Laurence Olivier received his final communion. He died the following morning, on July 11, 1989, at 11:15 a.m., after fighting illness and physical decline for 22 long years. He was filled with such incredible strength, right up to the very end. And now, a few more things to share that I learned during my research. Not many, because I think we've already covered most everything. Bullet point number 1. Sir Laurence Olivier was afraid he was going to fall in love, or at least in lust, with Marilyn Monroe when she came over to make The Prince and the Showgirl with him in 1957. But her unpredictability on film sets, as in whether or not she was going to show up when she was supposed to or not, made his perception of her sour. And the lust he was afraid he'd feel turned into plain old annoyance. Despite it all, he was very impressed with her work in the final product. Bullet point number 2. Sir Laurence Olivier was Francis Ford Coppola's second choice for the role of Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather. Olivier even perfected the accent in anticipation of it. Bullet point number 3. Sir Laurence Olivier's favorite color was purple. When the undertakers arrived to retrieve his body, they placed him in a purple bag. In conclusion, I was exhausted just reading about Sir Laurence Olivier's drive and determination in his work as an actor and director. That man worked hard, and I think he loved every second of it. The theater was his home. It was where his heart was most at ease, and his passion for his art shone through in every single project he took on. Well, except maybe that remake of The Jazz Singer. His mind and body had been telling him for years, decades, that it was time to slow down. But he just could not slow down. Even as his body started the slow process of retiring from the hustle of the theater, and then an even faster process, Sir Laurence Olivier used every ounce of energy his body held and put it into his work. He just couldn't walk away, until he was finally forced to. The great love of Sir Laurence Olivier's life was Vivien Leigh. Their relationship began in a blaze of fire, filled with passion and desire. They were addicted to one another and couldn't bear the thought of being apart. Vivien Leigh's mental illness was the dark cloud that crept in over their relationship, and eventually, the cloudy days outweighed the sunny days. When Vivien was well, things were wonderfully perfect. But when she was unwell, it was dark and terrifying, and eventually dangerous. I wish she could have had the treatment options we have today. If she did, just maybe they would have made it. But it came to the point where the toll to himself was just too great, and he had to break free. Thank you, Sir Laurence Olivier, for showing us the great reward that can come from following your passions. You directed your life into the direction of what you wanted to do, and in return, you were given a long and rich life of doing what you loved most. bringing characters to life on the stage. And thank you for the incredible legacy you left behind. And thank you all for listening. And now I would like to read a review of the week. Want me to read yours? Gotta leave one. If you like this show, please drop a comment on Spotify or a review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Those are really the only two I see usually. And today, I want to share a 5-star rating and review left on Apple Podcasts by One Schatz. It is titled, A True Gem for Old Hollywood Lovers. And they wrote, if you love the stars of classic Hollywood, this podcast is a must-listen. Erin does an incredible job researching and sharing the fascinating stories of Hollywood's golden age. Her passion for these legendary stars shines through in every episode, and it's a joy to hear her bring their lives to life. Thank you for the countless hours of research and dedication that you put into each episode. I truly appreciate all you do and look forward to each episode. Now this is how you leave a review. This is amazing. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to bring these lives to life for you guys. Yes, it is a ton of work, but I truly love doing it, and I am learning new things that I didn't know before every single day. I think it's important for us to keep these legacies alive, and I am so happy to be one of the vehicles to do it. Thanks so much for this great review. Hey, how about some bonus content? Anybody want some of that? I am telling you, I have some really interesting and fun stuff over on Patreon. So, what is Patreon? If you don't know, it is a platform for people to support their favorite content creators. And for us content creators to then share special bonus content with you as a thank you for your support. We're talking full-length bonus episodes, cocktail party episodes, and movie of the month recap episodes every single month. Let's break these down a bit so you can see what they're all about. First, those bonus episodes. These are episodes that are 30 to 45 minutes long, one every month, and in them I cover Golden Age related topics instead of the individual stars like I do on the regular feed. Past bonus episodes include things like film set tragedies, the production code, haunted Hollywood, a look inside old Hollywood film studio gates, the history of the Oscars, Emily Post's Rules of Etiquette, the Hollywood Studio Club, famous dogs from Hollywood's golden age, and many more. This month, I will be talking about old-timey communication and telecommunication, how our stars communicated long distance in their day. And I decided to do this because of our star today, Sir Laurence Olivier. Can you imagine how much he would have loved texting? I'm telling you, these bonus episodes will make you smarter. So that's that. Now let's talk about the cocktail parties. Those are seriously so fun. In those bonus episodes, I share a vintage cocktail recipe with you, and then I share the history of that cocktail. And then while I sip away on said cocktail, I read you old Hollywood gossip straight from the pages of my old Hollywood movie magazines. It is super fun. So we got that every month too. And then, finally, each month we have a movie of the month. And in that bonus episode, I give you my own recap of the movie and share interesting facts about the production. Last month, we had Some Like It Hot. Such a good movie. So it is a ton of really, really fun content each month, and it can all be yours. But you know what? Not only do you get all the current and future bonus content as long as you remain a patron, but you get access to the entire backlog of bonus content. Hours and hours and hours of riveting entertainment. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? But the very best part of it all is that you will be supporting the hard work and long hours that go into producing this podcast all by myself. It is a lot of work, and I do have a full-time regular job too. I love it, but a little support is definitely very appreciated. And you get all that great bonus content as my thanks to you for your support. Please consider it. You can get a little glimpse at what is available by visiting patreon.com/Stars of the Golden Age podcast. There is a handy little link right in the show notes that will take you right there. Thanks, guys. Remember, reach for the positive in every day, be kind to everyone you encounter, and have a great rest of your week. For this episode, I used the following books: Olivier by Terry Coleman, Sir Larry, The Life of Laurence Olivier by Thomas Kiernan, Love Scene, The Story of Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh by Jesse L. Lasky Jr. and Pat Silver, and Laurence Olivier, A Biography by Donald Spoto. I also used timeline information from vivandlarry.com and IMDB.